to tell my mum that I've been called up. Sure. And that was on my mind for quite some time. But it was
In 2003, a brown envelope landed on a doormat in rural England.
Yeah. I wanted to be in the army. Banking paid better. I'd be an infantryman. But, I was a proud infantryman. I'm for Tony.
A 19-year-old bank clerk, not a soldier by trade.
Probably, I do. I think that tactile memory is more ingrained in war zone. Purgatory is not knowing.
He went as a citizen, a reservist thrown into a real war.
But he's one of ours. He was our mean guy, you know what I mean?
He wasn't a medic by trade. He became one anyway.
On chill now. Best bath I ever had. It was...
And he carried what he saw all the way home. 20 years later, a university professor in Japan.
Why is it not being recorded? Why are people not talking about it? Why are people not remembering it? So that was my main...
He finally wrote the truth. Basra and Back. The unlikely infantryman, in his own words. This is Voice for Valor. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Matthew Okuhara. My goodness, when I read that in your email, I was full on expecting somebody of a different ethnicity when we first started talking. But here we are with Matthew. So as soon as I saw that, I said, this guy's got a wonderful sense of humor. So Matthew, welcome to Voice for Valor.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am looking forward to this conversation because as I looked into your background and got to know you during our previous conversation a few weeks ago, we have so many similarities. I was a former Series 7 stockbroker guy, and you came from the banking industry. How does a young banking kid show up now in Japan? And how many years have you been in Japan?
Yeah, this is my ninth year in Japan now. So after leaving the service, I got uniform service in general. I came out to Japan, and now I teach at a university. I teach kids who want to be teachers. So I'm in the Faculty of Education at a university in Japan. And that's a great job. It really is. It's outstanding.
What is the British footprint, or just the English-speaking footprint around you? Obviously, you're in Japan. It's the culture's 99% Japanese. What is there any sort of support for you from the English-speaking side?
In the city I'm in, okay, this is not Tokyo, Kyoto. I'm a little bit removed from those sorts of very, very large cosmopolitan cities. I'm in a smaller city, in a prefecture known as Nagano. It's very rural. But it's got some reasonable sized cities, about the size, I would say, of places like St. Petersburg in Florida. Not overly big, but noticeably large. And really, there's not too many English speakers at all. If you don't speak Japanese, then you're not going to manage to do your grocery shopping or fill up the car with fuel. So, yeah, it's the English footprint isn't so big, but the Japanese Faculty of Education requires that not only do I teach kids how to be teachers themselves, I also have to teach them how to teach English. That's a mandatory part of Japanese education.
What led you to the Japanese language? Why did you choose that one and take this leap of faith and move over there to do this?
That's actually an interesting story. I won't give you the King James. I'll give you something a lot shorter. But I was in a specialist police unit in the UK after leaving the military, and they dealt with the movement of the most toxic material on earth, nuclear fuel, and a lot of that had to move from the UK to Japan. And I've always had a thing for languages. I've got enough space in my noodle up here for one extra language. First one was French, second one was Arabic, and now it's Japanese. So they needed police officers who were tactically trained operators who are also bilingual. Now, the French ones we had, obviously a lot of our work was with the Americans. We had a few Scandinavian, and no one could speak Japanese. And I was like, I'll learn Japanese. I learned Japanese.
I'm impressed. My wife has that same brain as you, that she can pick up a language so quickly. I can't. I think I would have to go through a language immersion program, and you just keep beating me against the head to learn that stuff, because for some reason it doesn't click to me.
But that's what I did. I created my own language immersion program. I studied Japanese for 3 weeks at a private school, just a one-to-one thing. After 3 weeks, I flew out to Tokyo because I had some time, and I thought I'll get myself lost in the big city and it's sink or swim. I have to ask for directions to get back to the hotel, and that's what I did. I created my own immersion school.
When you joined the military, had you already been speaking a language? Did you already know Arabic? Was there a skill set that they wanted you to have?
When I joined the military, I could already speak French because I learned that at school. That was just part of it. The funny thing is I learned an extra word. Every time I learned an Arabic word, I forgot a French word. That was how it worked. But when I joined the military in response to aggression, no, I couldn't speak Arabic at the time now.
So your book, Basra and Back, we were talking a couple weeks ago. You mentioned Barnes and Noble. You obviously found a wonderful publishing team and a wonderful editor to put this all together. What inspired you to write Basra and Back?
The thing is with British war memoirs, and I think American ones too, they're all quite gung-ho. I mean, I've read Lone Survivor, which is becoming more controversial as time goes on. I've read Bravo to Zero, which had the same problem in the UK as well. And I've read quite a lot of books, even from the French Foreign Legion and back to the Second World War. I do enjoy narrative nonfiction, especially military narrative nonfiction. Where are the reserves? It's very, very hard to find a reservist. Now, I was not full-time military. I was working in banking when I was a soldier, but I was mobilized into the infantry because I was an infantryman, and there has not been a book that actually covers that part of the military life. And in the UK, 20% of the infantry was reservist. Why is it not being recorded? Why are people not talking about it? Why are people not remembering it? So that was my main inspiration of writing it. And my second inspiration, which is a little bit selfish, I guess, is I wanted to share the humor and the lifestyle of what it is to be a soldier, because a lot of people just don't get it, and it's nice just to talk about it or satisfy my own vanity to some extent. But I really, really wanted to talk, and I really wanted people to listen.
I enjoy the humor piece, the humor parts of your book to humanize it and allow the non-military folks to understand what you're going through. But your book did not start off with humor. Your book opens with running towards the gunfire outside the Basra hospital, trying to help an Iraqi policeman, whose shoulder's been torn apart. Why did you want the reader to meet you there first?
I wanted to show that if you're a reservist, you are a soldier. You're not being given lesser duties. You're not being given second line duties, third line duties, or we call them REMPs in the UK, rear echelon motherfuckers. What have you got for it in the UK? Was it POGs, personnel other than grunts? I wanted to show that as a reservist, you were not immune from the action. And I also wanted the introduction to be quite brutal, because people see those two conflicts and they think, oh, it's low intensity conflict, it's not actual warfare. It was violent, it was difficult. So I needed to set the book off with something which actually put the reader into what these situations really felt like.
In that opening, it's almost like a young man asking, how the hell did I get here? When you look back, what is the shortest honest answer to that question?
The shortest honest answer is, how did I get here? I wanted to be in the army. Banking paid better. I became a banker and a reservist. I got called up, and then I got sent out to Iraq. It was completely unexpected, though. I was not expecting to do it. In fact, when I joined the military, they said, oh, don't worry about it. No one ever gets called up from this reservist unit. We've sent one person out during the Kosovo War, and that's because she was a typist, and they needed more typists. The battalion has never been mobilised, not since the 50s. And I thought, oh, great. So I get to play hide and seek, dress in green, do soldiery things, and I get to make lots of money banking as well. No, that's not what happened, but that's the short version of how I got there.
When I first joined the military, the recruiter obviously had a quota to fill. So I wanted to be a pilot, and he said, your scores are not good enough. We only have one pilot slot per class, because I had already had my college education. So I went to officer training school. So I had a very similar path to you when you were describing the reserves. Although I was entering active duty, I was already a 25-year-old man. And so he says, your grades aren't good enough to be a pilot, but you can be a navigator. And I said, well, navigator has an 8-year commitment. Pilot has a 10-year commitment. If I can't be a pilot, I'm not sure what this navigator stuff is. So I'll do Air Force needs, do a 4-year enlistment, 4-year sign up. So what's the big need of the Air Force right now? Well, it's a space and missiles officer. And he said, it's a wonderful job. You only work 8 days a month. The rest of the month is off for you. So you can do whatever you want. You're a really athletic guy. You can go to the gym. You can go golfing. You can go mountain biking. You can do all your things because you only have to work 8 days a month. Not so much. 9/11 happens. DEFCON levels are raising. We're out in these missile silos. It was not an 8-day-a-month job. So,
it was every day.
Yeah. So for them saying, don't worry about it. You're going to be a reservist being a weekend warrior was definitely not the case for you.
Well, it was sold to me as SWAT some weekends and Tuesdays. It didn't turn out that way.
So obviously war is this huge machine, if you will, but the memories are often tiny and precise. You describe a red shoe, a packet of Haribo? How do you pronounce that?
Haribo.
Haribo.
Yeah, very, very popular with the grunts. Yeah.
A frozen vegetarian meal, a camp chair, and blood running off your arms. Do these objects carry the memory better than the big explanations?
Probably, I do. I think that tactile memory is more ingrained than the emotional memory. So I would agree. I mean, I don't eat Haribo anymore. Put it that way.
So take us back to that Saturday morning when this brown envelope arrived.
Okay. So yeah, this is the actual call-out notice itself. I don't know if you can see it. It's backwards. Notice of call-out, it says.
Reservist Forces Act 1996.
That's right. Reserve Forces Act 1996, 2517 3850. That's me. You've been called up. I wasn't expecting that letter. A couple of months ago, before that letter, I'd been in an interview with the colonel, the lieutenant colonel of the regiment, because I wanted to enter officer training. And I thought, here's a letter from the army. Maybe I did a really good job with this interview. And he's inviting me for the Army Officer Selection Board, the AOSB. No, none of it. I'm a private. I'm not an officer cadet. I'm a private. And I'm being called up for mobilised service in Iraq. There's a British saying for that. My arse fell out as soon as I read that. It was a huge shock because I had nothing to warn me. No one had been warned about it at all. I got straight on my phone. I sent a message to my good friend Bros at the time, and my corporal, who was my section commander, squad commander, and said, I've had this letter, and it says I have to report to the mobilization center. And they came back and said, we've had the same one too. In fact, the squad leader said, I've had my holiday brochure delivered as well. It's just so that was how it happened. But it was a huge shock. And my biggest worry was not, I'm going to go to Iraq. I'm going to be in combat because I'm a rich man. My biggest worry was, how am I going to tell my mum that I've been called up? and that was on my mind for quite some time. But it was it was the biggest shock of my life. And despite everything, I'm an old man now, or older man, and still the biggest shock I've ever received.
So now you're in the Army, and your dad was saying, get a job that has something useful. What did you hear in that advice as you're now in the Army, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to tell my mom, not only am I in the Army, but now I'm being mobilized.
Yeah, I should listen to my dad, shouldn't I? I should become a signaller, so someone or a truck driver, someone who had a skill. But no, I was going as an infantryman. But I was a proud infantryman. I'm from a town in Gloucester. I know there's a Gloucester, Massachusetts. We have a Gloucester in England as well. The original Gloucester, the best Gloucester. I'm a Gloucester boy. Gloucester boys joined the Gloucesters. So there was pride in that. And we had uniform distinctions. In fact, the Gloucestershire Regiment had the American presidential unit citation for fighting in Korea. We're a very highly decorated unit. So on that half, I was really, really proud to think, yeah, I'm going to keep up the traditions of this fine regiment. On the other hand, I was like, oh man, what I'm going to say. So it's a huge dichotomy for me. And I should listen to my dad and join a more sensible unit.
I'm glad you mentioned the badge. In the military, obviously, these badges have so much history behind them. And I was reading your book. I was trying to put myself in England and thinking about it from a British perspective. And I almost thought about it as like a football club. Everybody has these local clubs that you just live and die for. And that badge, what's the history behind that badge?
This badge.
That's the badge.
That's the badge.
That's your unit. Okay.
Yeah, this badge was earned in the Battle of Alexandria, 1801. The Gloucestershire Regiment was not called that at the time. They were called the 23rd Regiment of Foot, and they were fighting against the French in Alexandria. They were surrounded, outnumbered, but the Gloucestershire Regiment turned back to back, and they formed like a herringbone formation where they could shoot in any direction, and they managed to repel the French. And for that reason, the Gloucestershire Regiment from 1801 became the only regiment in the British Army that could wear a badge on the front of their headdress, or one on an identical one or a similar one on the back as well, to symbolize that they could never be surrounded and defeated that way. And so it's a very, very unique distinction in the British Army, which is carried on by the Rifle Regiment. Now, obviously, the regiment evolved. So it started in 1801. They fought hard during the Second World War, during the European campaign, and also in Malaysia against the Japanese, which is odd because I'm in Japan now. And then they fought hard in Korea, were awarded the Americans presidential unit citation, fighting alongside the US forces. And that tradition carried up until 2007, when the regiment was amalgamated into a much larger formation.
You just brought up some ironic things that I didn't realize that I was going to talk about, but boy, you've struck a nerve with me right there. So right now, the current administration is talking about pulling out of all these areas, pulling troops out of Germany, pulling out of NATO, and yet we're here in this conflict with Iran, and people thinking that you can win this through an air campaign, when it's been proven time and time again, it's a ground campaign. You need boots on the ground to maintain and hold that land. And I explain this to folks that don't understand or have not experienced that strategic background, but I'm like, the reason we're still in Germany is to control that area, near the border of Russia. Yeah. Or the fact that all of their fighter pilots are required to be trained in the United States. They're not allowed to be trained in Germany. There's a reason for that. There's a reason we have a huge footprint in Japan. You can't just have an air campaign and walk away and think that there's regime change, no matter what the TV pundits tell you. So it's sad but true. And at the same time, then they do become your allies. You do promise to protect them in times of need. And so I see what's going on in Ukraine, and the pundits don't talk about the fact that we promised them protection if they gave up the nuclear capabilities when Russia fell. And it's sad that people don't bother to read history, and it's even more discouraging when the TV pundits are not truthful about what's really going on.
I would say there's a short memory sometimes for the political class, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. But I digress, because now I want to talk about way more important things. Like in the U.S. military, it's meat and potatoes, which I imagine is similar in the Royal Army. So what the heck is a vegetarian doing in the Army? You don't belong here.
I've been vegetarian since I was 8, and not for any good reason. I just didn't like meat. And when you say a vegetarian in the Army, well, that's okay. A vegetarian in the infantry, that's unique, and that's why I got the nickname Princess, I think, for some other things as well. But what's the vegetarian doing in the Army? Well, I was genuinely interested in the Army, and they could cater for it. And when I went to the recruiter, they said, yeah, don't worry about it. You can have a vegetarian option. The vegetarian option was sometimes nothing at all. And, he'd say, here's the burger. Well, you can have the bread and someone else can have the meat. And you've had something to eat, haven't you? It was hard, but I got used to it, and my principles were quite strong, and I decided to maintain those principles despite being a frontline infantry soldier. And I'm still vegetarian now. I live in Japan. I'm sure maybe you've been to Japan. They've got great cuisine, fish, and wagyu beef and things like that. I've never tasted it. I've got no interest in tasting it. But I'm not a political vegetarian. I'm not like someone who says, "Oh, you shouldn't, you shouldn't, you shouldn't." Personal preference. You do what you want. I'll do what I want.
So no fish either. It's just
Well,
so you
actually,
never.
no fish. In Gloucestershire. I'm from Gloucestershire in the UK. It's not like Gloucester, Massachusetts. Has got a huge fishing culture. In Gloucester, England, it's kind of rare for people to consume a lot of fish. It's just so southwest. It's more of a meat and two veg kind of area.
Okay. So now I want to transfer over to your medical background. So you suffer a knee injury, which obviously is a serious setback for you, but it moves you into the medic course. Did that injury accidentally give you a role that you were best suited for?
I think it may have done because I'm wired up for systems. Do this, do this, do this, do this. This is what it is. And a lot of medical training is that it's breathing, breaks and burns. Sort those things out and you get it. And I'll give you some background to this the injury guy. When I was at school, I was in a 200-meter sprinting team, and I sprinted so hard that I blew my knee out. And that recovered after time, but the same injury repeated itself during a training exercise in England before going to Iraq, and I needed a few months to ease it up. Well, not a few months, but about 6 weeks to ease it up. And because of that, whilst the rest of the platoon went on to do specialist weapons training, using the light machine gun, which we hadn't had before, 40mm grenade launcher, things like that, which I hadn't trained in, our lieutenant, or lieutenant as you say, he said, well, okay, well, you can go and do the medics course. And so I went to do the medics course, which still involved a lot of movement, but it wasn't tactical. The focus was actually the medical, the clinical skills. So I learned those clinical skills at the end of our pre-deployment training, and it suited me pretty well. I understood it very quickly. I was quite happy that, I didn't need things to be repeated, and ultimately I enjoyed it. And I would say that even in later life, those skills that I learned then are still useful now.
My toughest deployment preparing for, I was going to Africa for 5 months, and my wife and my 2 kids came with me to the airport, and we were hanging out in the USO before we departed. My commander walks in the door, saying thank you for going on this deployment, and I'm sitting there hugging my kids, knowing that I'm not going to see them for 5 months, and it still hurts to this day to think about that. My youngest had not learned to walk yet, and my wife was saying, I'll hold him down. I won't let him walk until you get home. And so that emotional experience, you had a similar one in the book. The morning you're leaving, you tell your father, just drop me off at the gate. And then you notice his car still parked nearby. What's happening emotionally in that distance between the two of you?
Okay, so my parents are separated. We weren't a family unit; they were separated. So when I was in my early teens, my father, who was a police officer, he met another police officer, and she's a lovely lady. I've got nothing against her. You can't argue with matters of the heart. So he decided to separate with my mum. But his house was very close to the reservist centre, and that's where I needed to be in order to deploy. And so I stayed the night there. And that's where he's going to go. He's my father. He's a police commander. He's not like a police constable or an officer. He was the chief of the major crimes unit. So that's basically the chief detective for the county. Tough man, hard man, strict man. Never used to show a lot of emotion. I wasn't expecting to get any emotion. I was expecting him to drop me off and for him to go off back home and put the kettle on, but no. So I was on the bus. I put in my, had a music player, started listening to some music, and I could see his car still waiting in the corner. It surprised me. I wasn't expecting him to be there, but he was there. And I had to think to myself, well, why is he still there? And, it made me think, well, this is probably the last chance he might ever get to. If something does go wrong, I'm an infantryman. Infantrymen are the ones who are in the British military, certainly the ones who are being taken out. Last time, maybe he's going to see me, and it made me feel a little bit. I should have listened to his advice. Maybe I should have been a technician instead of a combat soldier. But it reminded me that, even though the family was split, we were still a family unit. It was just wasn't traditional. I was happy to see him there, but I was also a little bit heartbroken at the same time that he'd never shown me that kind of emotion before.
So it took the potential loss of a son for him to give you the attention that you craved.
I think so. He's got 3 sons. I'm the middle one.
I was going to say, you have a twin.
Yeah.
You have a twin brother, right? So what's the dynamic there? Did your dad play favorites between the twins?
Well, he didn't, because he was kind of absent after our teens. But he certainly likes the older son. They very, very close. He's a banker as well, actually. My twin brother, he is very different to me. I'm quite gregarious. I like to talk. I like to make friends. I like to do things. He's a lot quieter than me, but he's a lot smarter as well. He's really, really smart. He went to university in London, studied history, and now he works for the British equivalent of the NSA and doing all sorts of secrety things. So he doesn't talk about it. I'm not allowed to ask about it. He's super, super smart. I got the sporty thing. I was in a 200-meter sprinting team, but I blew my knee out from running too fast. But I got the speed back. So we look alike, but we're quite different. He's smart. I'm fit, and then I think the favorite son was the older one.
Seeking that fatherly love and guidance, did you develop any father figures in your unit before departing to Iraq?
Yeah, Corporal Mark Hill, definitely. And I knew Mark a little bit before joining, because Mark worked at in Gloucester. There's a factory that makes undercarriage for Airbus aircraft. And my father's brother, my uncle, worked in the same factory as him. They were on the same shift. And so Mark Hill and my dad's brother Dave, they work on the same shift. So I knew him a little bit. I had met him before at country fairs and those sorts of things, and so I knew who he was. Oh, and I went to the reservist centre. I kind of knew him a little bit anyway. So I had someone to talk to. And of course, when you're brand new, you gravitate towards the person that you know a little bit, and you get to know them a little bit better. And as my service progressed, even though it was quite short, we actually became quite good friends, despite the fact I was 19. He was 46 by the time we deployed, so he was quite a lot older than me. But he was definitely the father figure. And not just for me. Even though he was just a corporal, he used to be in the Grenadier Guards, which is a fine British regiment. And everyone's seen them because they're the ones who stand with the big bearskin hats outside of Buckingham Palace. He used to be in them. So he was an excellent soldier. He knew everything. He knew everyone. And as far as I'm concerned, he never made mistakes. He was the guy to go to when you need a problem. When you had any kind of problem. I wouldn't go to the Sergeant Major. That's who you're supposed to go to. I'd go to Mark.
That's what I love about the Guard. I joined the National Guard in 2010, and once I got into the Guard, I realized it is a community. You're around folks for decades rather than just 2 or 3 years before you PCS off to your next location. It has its pros and cons. Its cons being, if you make a mistake or you did something silly, it survives throughout the years because you're seeing the same folks.
Getting a reputation for life. Yeah.
It is. It's a reputation for life. So there is that piece where the social gossip sticks around. But at the same time, there's a love and trust in that community that I think that young soldier, that 19-year-old soldier, I feel like you succeed, or your chances of success are so much better knowing that you're in a community and you're not some random 19-year-old all by yourself in some unit far away from home. So I'm glad that you had that experience, because I noticed that with my airmen that I worked with, being able to be there for them and mentor them and know that one day they're going to be in your shoes. For instance, multiple young enlisted folks from my unit in Charlotte, North Carolina, started off enlisted, and then they became officers, and then it became pilots. So I have the full faith, 20, 25 years from now, they will be the senior military officer
They'll
in
be the
charge of that
mentors.
in charge of that unit. So I do love the construct of your unit seems very similar to mine.
Yeah,
But
and I think that's really important with the reserves. I mean, it's not just a military unit; it's a community.
coming from active duty, and then I was also in the reserves before I went to the Guard. As a C-17 pilot, I was chatting with some other C-17 commanders, and they were giving me a hard time. They said, "Oh, you're just a C-17 commander of a Guard unit. You're not a C-17 commander of a active duty unit." And so I said, "Okay, guys, in the American military, we have this thing called weapons school. You wear this patch on your sleeve, and it says you went through basically 6 months of a grind of flying and knowing all these special tactics, and it's a very difficult school to go through. The washout rate is quite high. I never went to the program. It just wasn't something I was interested in. However, it's very common to have one weapons officer per squadron in an American active duty military unit, perhaps two, typically the commander or the DO, and then one, so maybe two. So we're in this room with all these C-17 commanders, and I said, "How many of you have more than 2 weapons school patch graduates in your squadron?" Nobody raised their hand. I said, "My unit has 9. So next time you think about the Guard or the reserve being less
Just
than,
guards. Yeah.
just realize that it's because those guys and gals made a choice to continue to serve, but they wanted it to be in a Guard or reserve unit so they didn't have to move anymore and they could provide some stability for their families." So I said, we have 9 weapons officers. So just keep that in mind when you think that a reserve or Guard unit's less than. But I digress. So here we got this 19-year-old kid. Thankfully, he's got some older mentors to depend upon. But now you're in a C-130 flying to Iraq. Describe the noise, the cramped seats, the toilet.
I got in the toilet.
Walk us through this experience on the mighty C-130 Hercules.
Okay, well, you have to understand, the aviation in me, you're a pilot, I'm not. I've flown a glider, a sailplane, and not big planes. So the only time I've been on a plane was to go to Disney World in London, not like a 747 or something like that. So I was used to comfort on the thing. And so we went to board the C-130, and we were put on these red canvas benches on either side of the aircraft and one down the middle. So you had 4 rows. And we had boarded in Qatar. And the sergeant had said, "All right, lads, I don't want to go in dehydration whilst waiting for the plane. So everyone drink 2 bottles of water before you get on the plane because we've got to wait for an hour." So yeah, sergeant says, drink 2 bottles. Drink 2 bottles, okay? Well, I didn't sweat it out, It had to come out the other way. And I'm sure, you probably run a C-130, there is no toilet on the C-130. There's like a post box sort of flap on the partition between the crew compartment and the cargo compartment. And so as I'm standing there thinking, okay, well, I've got to evacuate this liquid from my body because this is dead uncomfortable. Okay, I've got one guy here, one guy here, and me in the middle, holding on to the old chap, trying to get rid of this image of stage fright, and eventually I managed to. Got back onto the seat, and then it did a tactical landing. Aircraft comes in nice and steep. Well, I'd never even been on a roller coaster before, so this aircraft was coming again. I was, comes around, it turns a hard bank round to the right. Oh my God, I couldn't wait to get on the ground. I need it. I'm glad you're in the a pilot, because I never would have made it as any kind of aircraft. I was designed to be on the ground, I think. It was a very uncomfortable experience for me. And I had to do it again and again and again, because whilst you're on tour, you're getting moved around by aircraft and helicopter all the time.
I have quite a few C-130 pilot friends, and the way they treat it is they bring out the big black plastic bag that goes inside this basket that you're describing, and whoever uses it has to be the one that takes the black bag off.
I didn't even see it. You ever see that film, platoon. I think most people have seen platoon. The first thing I remember once we landed is the tail ramp came down like that, and you just get out, and the heat just hit me. It was like someone was blowing a hairdryer in my face. I thought, oh my God, it was hot where we departed from, but once we arrived in Basra, it was like 40 degrees. I'd never experienced that kind of heat before. And so my thought was immediately taken away from the discomfort on the plane to this new, overwhelming environment.
We were in Egypt dropping off some helicopters for a mission, and it was so hot there. And the C-17 has pretty good air conditioning. It was so hot there that we put all the windscreens up to block out all the light. And we took off our flight suits. So men and women in their socks and underwear and
skivvies, yeah,
and their skivvies, because we were just, you couldn't drink enough water. I mean, we were just sweating like no other. So here we are on an airplane in our skivvies, running checklists because it was so hot. So yeah, you're right. I mean, until somebody goes there and feels how powerful that heat is.
You can describe I'm hot, but you have to feel that hot. And it's not just, I sat in a sauna. That's the same sort of temperature. Well, it's the same sort of temperature. It's not the same sort of feeling. It was a shock to the system.
So another C-130 story. We converted from C-130s to C-17. So a lot of our folks that came from the C-130 community had never been on a C-17. So we were doing familiarization rides. And so we had some folks in the back, and we were doing what's called a tactical descent. And so you're moving the airplane in a maximum reverse thrust and configuring it in a way that it's basically turning itself into a giant parachute. So we're doing, 10,000 feet per minute descent. The airplane is shaking. You're really strapped in. You talk about roller coaster ride. The airplane's shaking. And then we come out of that maneuver and we level off, and we're getting ready to fly a low level. One of the ladies downstairs unbuckles, comes upstairs and says, the regulations don't allow you to do touch and go landings with passengers on board. I'm going to have to report you guys. We said, we didn't do a touch and go. We never even touched the ground. This is what a tactical descent feels like. And she was absolutely shocked at how violent that descent was. She thought we were doing a tactical landing into an assault zone. It's like, no, this is just how aggressive this airplane is. So like you're saying, until you experience it, you just think
you can describe it, but this description and experience, they're a world apart.
So back to descriptions and experiences, I've never slept in a palace before, but you slept in the Basra Palace. So what was that like?
Well, when you put it that way, and I've never put it that way, I can actually say, yeah, princess, because that was my nickname, princess slept in a palace. It wasn't like that. The Basra Palace is not like Buckingham Palace, a very, very grand building, or Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, which was where Winston Churchill was born. It was basically an army base with some nice buildings. Most of the palace itself was billets for troops, vehicle pools, maintenance areas, armories, supply areas. But there were a few nice buildings. One was for who used to be the provincial governor. One was for the military commander. One was for Saddam, if he ever turned up, because obviously he had his premises all over the place. So we had some really, really nice buildings, and most of it was turned into a military base. And it was built as a response to the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s, that border conflict, because Basra is right on the border with Iran. But the palace itself, it had a huge network. I guess it was about 20 kilometers worth of roads inside the footprint. It had about 2 meter thick concrete walls all the way around it, with guard towers at regular intervals. And it was split into several sections. There was a section for the British military and the British consulate. There was a section for the Coalition Provisional Authority, which was the government at the time. And there was a section for the American contractors and
youth. Trust in your platoon. I'm with my guys. Ignorance or a useful state of mind. Walk us through that first time outside the wire.
All of the above, probably. So Salamanca Company. Yeah, the name of our company was Salamanca Company, which is named after the Battle of Salamanca, where the British fought in Spain in the Napoleonic era. we had 3 platoons, 1 platoon, 2 platoon, 3 platoon, first, second, third platoon. We were 3 platoon, and we were the first platoon assigned for patrols. We literally arrived in the palace, and that day we had to head out. The reason we had to head out is because the company that we were relieving needed to exit the palace. They needed to get themselves to the Basra airport in order to, which was the point of deembarkation. They need to get themselves out, so we need to clear their route. It was nighttime. It was the only night that it rained. The sky was purple, like a bit like Ghostbusters. You ever seen the film Ghostbusters when the Gozerian comes into New York and the sky turns purple? The sky was purple. There were oil derricks burning on the horizon. I remember that very, very distinctly. I was completely sensorily overwhelmed, and we were assigned to go out on patrol. So we spent about an hour and a half as the grunts, under the supervision of the corporals, getting our equipment ready, night vision bullets, bombs, grenades, 4 litres of water per man because we expected to be out for about 4 hours. And we made our way to the back gate of the palace. We weren't going to leave from the front gate. We're going to make our way to the back gate, loop around the front of the palace, and get to the main convoy route and check that convoy route. What do you expect? It's the first patrol. We've been training for this with months of training. And the UK has a lot of learned experience of clearing convoy routes, especially from places like Northern Ireland, but to a lesser extent places like Kosovo and Bosnia. So we're expecting low intensity conflict. We didn't wear helmets, we wore berets. We carried our emergency equipment on our backs, so it was just light order, as it were. We got to the gate. A good friend of mine, Drew, Andy Drew, he was the first one out. He's a lot tougher than me, so they sent him out. He ran straight out the gate to where the officer had said, this is where we're going to assemble outside. And I was the second one out. And I remember crossing that line actually out of the gate because I actually had a feeling of safety and a feeling of vulnerability between those two areas. I was 19, he says ignorance, all those sorts of things. Why is ignorance? I also wonder, what's the difference between here and there? Inside the base, I've got 2-meter thick walls. There's a QRF, we've got helicopters, overhead armored vehicles. Out there, it's just me, a rifle, and some body armor. So we crossed and went firm. I don't know what the American equivalent is doing firm is. We formed a defensive circle and then started to patrol into the city. It was late at night. It was 36, 37 degrees. The temperature hadn't dipped very much. I made our way out. And it was an uneventful patrol. I spoke some Arabic to the few people that I did see, but I felt very vulnerable. And the reason being is that Basra Palace is completely surrounded, or back then was completely surrounded by bombed out and abandoned buildings that the USAF, your lot, and the Royal Air Force had kindly redecorated with JDAMs and munitions.
So these Iraqi police that you're working with, they were lightly armed and barely equipped. What did that tell you about the impossible position they were in?
Well, okay, so if you were in the Iraqi police, it basically meant you lived close to the police station and wanted to have a job. And what they this gave them a blue shirt, basically. We can actually lead this into a patrol that I remember very well and I think about regularly. Our platoon was assigned to go on patrol. 4 Iraqi police officers. Only 3 turned up. I think the 4th one knew better because he knew I was coming, maybe someone tipped him off. We had to go and secure Basra Hospital, which was basically the neighbouring property. It was Basra Palace, which is obviously the footprint's absolutely huge. And Basra Hospital, as you know, a regional hospital, was also very, very large. So we had to move about a kilometre, so we could walk there to get there. But we had to secure it because intelligence has suggested there was some hostile reconnaissance going on, and these Iraqi policemen had been tasked by their boss to lift the guy who was doing the reconnaissance. He was in a white Toyota pickup truck. He had a camcorder, and they wanted to arrest him so they could interrogate him, interview him. Right. Big problem with that is every other vehicle in Iraq was a pickup truck at the time. Okay, so that means there was a lot of pickup trucks to look at. And so the Iraqi policemen were stopping all of these. And they weren't trained for it. There's nothing tactical about what they were doing at all. They didn't have torches, they didn't have notebooks, they didn't have handcuffs. One had an AK, 2 of them had Markov pistols. They were all wearing blue shirts. No body armor, speaking very casually, not protecting themselves at all. So they were police officers in name only. They were performing the function of police officers. And because they'd been asked and been paid to perform the functions of police officer, just in the same way that maybe someone was being asked to perform the function of a carpenter or a mason. They were going through the motions. didn't work out too well for them. So eventually, I took a load off. I sat down in like a sports field, which is only about 50 meters away from the entrance to Basra Hospital, and just tried to rest a bit. I was feeling a bit tired of it, a bit sore feet. All of a sudden, gunfire started, and I can't tell you. You could put a gun to my head, I would not know. It may have been a burst of fire, it may have been a single shot, it may have been sustained. I don't know. I was just up and running, following the lieutenant, Mr. Sherwood, excellent officer. You know, people take the piss out of British officers, and I do too. Not that one, because he was so good. But I was following him, and he pointed to an Iraqi policeman, blue shirt, lying on the ground, and said, "Princess, sort this guy out." He was obviously injured. And as we discussed earlier, I had done the medical training, so I was getting my grip. And the first thing you do once you've arrived at the casualty is you do what's called a primary survey, try to establish what the injury is. Well, that was obvious. His arm was hanging off. Okay, so it was his right shoulder. The ball in the socket was not there anymore, it was just the tendons underneath. So he was rolling around, his arm was completely limp. Okay, it's obvious where he's been hit. And doctrine for British medics at the time was a priority for breathing, bleeding, breaks, and burns. Well, he was breathing because he was screaming. So yeah, he was clearing away. Okay, so I got that, and he said, "I've been shot." And I was like, okay, this guy's breathing. Bleeding. Okay, yeah, he's bleeding a lot. Now, it may come as a surprise to, not to British listeners, but American listeners, that the British military is not very well funded. I did not have a proper medical equipment. I had some bandages. I didn't have any tourniquets. For tourniquets, for my own money, I had to go to a hardware store and buy bungee cords. And I took the hooks off and looped them and turned them into bungee cords. And I went to a hardware store, an outdoor shop, and bought a wilderness first aid kit. So my first aid kit, the army gave me some saline and drips and some bandages. They gave me some chest seals for lung wounds, and some cream for sunburn, because that was their most concerned about sunburn. Me, myself, for burns, I had to buy my own cling film, my own first aid wilderness kit, Bungee used tourniquets. You know, this guy was bleeding out. So I put one of the bandages, I stuck it on his shoulder. And I use this idiom all the time because it's just so accurate. When you wash your car, you know, when you put your sponge in the bucket and it just fills up with water straight away. It's exactly the same. I put this bandage on his shoulder.
Oh my goodness.
Straight away. I was like, wow, okay. And because it's just not there. I did the training. They said, if that doesn't work, put another one on. Put another one on. So another one, same thing happened. Bleeding's not arresting. Okay. If that doesn't work, tourniquet the injury. You think about it up here, where are you going to tourniquet? This is the clavicle, it's the collarbone. There's nothing to purchase. So as I was feeding the bungee cord up his arm, which was lifeless, by the way, man, that's not going to... I was doing this. And at the same time, I heard the sound of what sounds like a large porcelain pot shattering to pieces behind me. And it's actually gunfire from someone on a rooftop who's trying to take me and this guy, trying to finish him off. It's like this high-pitched sound. I didn't hear the gunfire, but I heard the disintegration of the... Fuck me. Okay, so the policeman. Luckily, we were at the hospital. The hospital security guards come out. They drag him away. I start to make my way to rejoin the section. Forrest Gump style, I trip over another injured Iraqi policeman. I was like, oh, what's the matter with this guy? Okay. Now, I'd learned my lesson very, very quickly. Don't treat casualties out in the open. I'd learned that lesson so I thought, I'll pick it. I started dragging him back towards the hospital too. And the security guards came out, and they didn't like me being close to them. Definitely not, because once I'd passed them, they pushed me away. They gave me a flying start, like a drag race. So it was like, oof, sent me away really quickly. So I was back out there, and I thought, oh, great, okay, back to the section, back to the squad. Where is everyone? I've been spending so much time, I wouldn't say so much time, but enough time treating these two casualties that I had no idea where the squad was. So I called out to my best mate, Fordy, Lance Corporal Ford. Fordy, where the fuck are you? Loud voice. I can hear them on my radio, but you couldn't hear them. You need that sense of direction from verbal commands, don't you? Wait. And he called me a name that I'm not going to repeat because other people are offended by this kind of word. But he called me that word. He said, I'm over the fence. Jump over, jump over. I'm 185 centimeters. This fence was about 300. So if you've ever done an assault course before, it's good training because there is always that final obstacle where you do have to pull yourself over, isn't there? I had to do that. Got onto the top of the fence, more bullets. Fell over the other side, didn't stick the landing at all. Winded myself, completely winded. Fall behind some cover. 40 was there. Okay. Oh, princess. It gave me some fire control orders, and then we started to re-engage with the enemy. But these police officers, they didn't stand a chance. Not a chance. Not tactical, not trained. Just given weapons and uniforms just as a matter of course. It should have been handled by our military police, maybe the British Royal Military Police. Maybe we stood a better chance. 2 were killed. 1 went missing. Never found him ever again. He probably got lifted and killed. What a disaster. But the British military, we pushed the... we won that engagement, essentially. We hit the firing point. So it was our first and most vicious contact. It was a pretty tough one. Every other subsequent contact was, if that was the benchmark, every other subsequent contact was considerably easier.
What about the red shoe? Tell us about the red shoe.
Okay. So the second police officer that I tripped over, I thought, I'm not treating him out in the open here. I picked him up, started dragging him backwards, and I was doing the primary survey as I was dragging him back. I wasn't looking at where the firing was coming from. I was looking where the squad was. I was quite conscientious about this guy because my initial plan was I'll get him into some cover and then I'll try to treat his injury. He was wearing white training shoes, like tennis shoes, like that. And so I looked at him from the head. He had a moustache and a blue shirt, nothing. The previous guy, obviously his shirt was completely red and his arm was hanging off. I was like, no injury. Going down, got to the stomach, got down to his foot. His left foot was, the sneaker, the shoe was red. Okay, this is where this guy's been hit. So the arm, I start tracing back up and I could see that there was some sort of injury, sort of like on the inner part of his leg, just above the knee. So he'd either taken a round or some sort of shrapnel. I didn't hear any devices, but that doesn't mean there weren't any. And he'd obviously taken some sort of injury to the knee, and he was bleeding quite profusely because there was a line as I was dragging him back where he'd been going. And when I got into the hospital, I was about to start getting my current off again. But like I said in the earlier part of the recollection, the security guards said, oh, we'll take him. And then it basically, if we don't want you anywhere near us, you're drawing fire. And I went to rejoin.
So now you've described a few Iraqi soldiers in dealing with their blood. What was it like to deal with your own blood?
Wow. Me personally, my own injuries, I mean, I never really got too badly injured, but if we're talking about British casualties, it's when you're in the infantry, you're very, very close with not just the people you know, you're very, very close with the people you don't know because you're all in the same boat, you're doing the same sort of thing. We had a convoy. We had to, we were an outpost, we weren't a main base. So resupply was either by helicopter, and a helicopter can, because we were, the British had the Chinook, obviously a heavy lift helicopter, overworked airframe. So we were relying on Puma. Do you know the Puma airframe? It's not as big. Medium lift helicopter, probably equivalent to a Black Hawk, something like that. So it's not overly capable for an outpost. It can essentials only. So we needed to send out some vehicles, pick up the supplies. 4-vehicle convoy. Got an armored vehicle at the back, armored vehicle at the rear, and 2 trucks in the middle. So the front one and the back one, there's the armored Land Rovers, and we call them Snatch. So it's the British equivalent of Humvee. Humvee is a very, very wide vehicle. These are Land Rover Defenders, so they're like farmers' vehicles, but they're armored, bulletproof. 7.62, 5.56, 9mm, not explosives. And we got the 2 in the middle, which are like 2.5-ton trucks, so canvas backs. they had to go to the logistics base, which is called Shaiba Logistics Base. Easy run, really. You had to leave the city to quite a densely populated area, but once you'd left the city, you were entered into the desert, which is completely flat. Now, the desert in Basra is not like something you might see in Death Valley or Arizona or something like that with sand. It's baked salt. It's just white, completely flat. It's like driving over cardboard, white cardboard, just all the way. So it's very, very hard to be ambushed. You can see people from miles away, literally from miles away. And if there was any disturbance on the road, you would detect it. So once you're out in the desert, you know you're pretty safe. They got hit in the city part. An RPG hit the front armored vehicle, killed the entire crew. They got blown to pieces. The coffins were filled with bricks. There's not enough to send back. You know, they were just obliterated. And the second vehicle, which was our Americans, you call it a quartermaster. Yeah. So our color sergeant hit the quartermaster was in that vehicle. He got shot in the stomach and basically exploded over the front of the vehicle. His guts fell out. And Mark Hill, the guy, my father figure, he was the driver of that vehicle. He was a corporal, and so the front vehicle, the commander's dead. The quartermaster, who's a color sergeant, he's dead. So Mark is now in charge. He's the corporal, and he guided the convoy out and got them the hell out of there. And then the Royal Air Force, their security detachment, came out and cleared up the area and secured the evidence. And God, what a mess that was. I mean, so those vehicles come back at me. The truck came back. There's still bits of the color sergeant inside it. You know what I mean? It was just, okay, when it was the Iraqi policeman, you could kind of disassociate, detach. You don't know these people. You don't. Yeah, we were a reservist battalion. I knew these guys, and not even from training. Yeah, I knew them. I knew them. And when you say dealing with your own blood, it is your own blood, because you're all one unit, you're one family, and that was a very. I wouldn't say it was a very humbling experience, but it was one that certainly created a sense of mortality in most of the troops. And no one liked the color sergeant. He was an asshole. He was a really, really mean guy. But he's one of ours. He was our mean guy. You know what I mean? The front vehicle as well. They were attached troops from the Royal Horse Artillery, an attached unit to us, and their best friends were in the rear vehicle, and they came back in, and I remember seeing a guy who was sat on the pavement. They were inconsolable. We weren't inconsolable because we didn't know them personally, but we knew who they were. So you feel a bit guilty for not sharing in their grief in the same way they did, because it's really hard to explain. But when you talk about your own blood, then like with the aircraft, you can describe what it's like, but experience and what it's like is completely different.
Fortunately, I haven't had to experience a situation where I've lost close teammates, but the unit I was in North Carolina, they all wear a patch that has a number 7 on it for MAFS 7. That is a firefighting mission. They were flying a firefighting mission, putting out a forest fire on the West Coast, you know, the Rockies, and a downdraft. They couldn't get out of it. So their airplane goes down. Everybody perishes on that aircraft except for the loadmasters, the 2 folks in the back of the airplane, of which they never flew again. I mean, they just the trauma, they couldn't get over it. And so much so that one of them is coming up here in August to visit Arlington National Cemetery, where the others are buried. And he is still to this day never flown. So he's going to drive from North Carolina up here to DC to see his fallen teammates. And like you said, I feel for him. I feel terrible for his experience, but I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be on that aircraft
Yeah.
and your fellow comrades perish except for the two of you in the back. So you mentioned about purgatory. What is purgatory to you in this war zone?
Purgatory is not knowing. It's better to know one way or the other which way you're going, isn't it? And then dealing with it as you see the lack of certainty, the lack of knowledge, the lack of progression one way or the other. That's purgatory. You need it to be over, and it needs to be over one way or the other. In the war zone, in the conflict zone, or as the British military will say, the low intensity conflict zone, not low intensity at all. Purgatory was probably for me, it was the time after patrol, not the time before patrol. The time before patrol, you were busy. You were busy. I remember after patrols, I had some pretty intense nightmares, some pretty intense dreams. Probably just because of my genetic makeup. I'm a very creative guy. I like music. I like writing music. I record music. Hey, you can listen to me on Spotify if you want. I've got my own stuff. I'm very imaginative as well. But I'm also very focused. So before patrol, I had a job. After patrol, your only job is to sleep. Sometimes I found that very hard, and to me, that was like purgatory.
So your book, I love the fact that we're talking about all these just dark and dramatic things. And then
It's supposed to be a funny book, yeah.
And then you walk outside and a bird shits on your head. I mean,
yeah. This is, and that's the funny thing, that was back at the hospital. So we'd had this horrible contact back at the hospital. And I was like, stuck to my friend Stick. So Stick, great guy. That's his nickname. It's not a real name, Stick. And we didn't call him Stick because he's really, really thin and fast, We called him Stick as in he was stuck to something. He just didn't move. He was like, unless you unstuck him, he was stuck. So he was Stick. I said, Stick, mate, I ain't going in the hospital. I've been in the hospital. And it was a really spooky place. And I came out and I said, man, you Stick, can we swap? And he's like, yeah, we can go. Because if you're inside the hospital, you can sit on some of the waiting benches, and do your equipment a bit and relax. And I said, Stick, mate, let's go outside. You go in there. So I got into the vehicle, into the hatch. The Humvee's got like a hatch, hasn't it, for the gunner? Well, I climbed up in the hatch. It was hot. Took my helmet off. Bird shit straight on my head. As soon as I'd done that, I was like, what? You don't realize a bird shit on your head, do you, until you check, and then you look at your hands. So not only you got shit, you got it on your hand as well, haven't you? And so, okay, how am I going to wash this off? Well, I got 4 liters of water, but I need to drink that, because I'm going to be out here for another 8 hours. So I got a water discipline. So I was like, so you just get the first aid kit, put a glove on, and you can just do the rest of the patrol like that. Oh man, I mean, yeah, if I could have found that bird. That was just, if there was a jester in the universe, that was him playing with me.
We get so amped up, and so anything and everything out there can kill you. So I understand, I completely understand how you guys can, what's the term I'm looking for? Overemphasize a particular experience, or you've got this suspected IED, right?
Yeah.
Walk us through this thing where you're like, oh my God, we've got an IED. Let's investigate this.
Oh, in the desert with we've been like I said, in a desert. It's completely flat. So it's a lump in the road, and you can see a lump in the road. When I say flat, I mean if you've got a spirit level, it's complete. The bubble is neutral. It's completely flat, and that is the road. And we had to take that track a lot because, like I said, with the previous convoy, that was our artery from the Shiva logistics base where all the supplies were. There was, an airfield there, so they could bring stuff into the city. Of course, it was either coming by helicopter, medium lift, heavier things, water, for example, had to come. So we're patrolling it a lot. So we're driving along, and there was a lump in the road. Stopped the car real quick. And Planty was driving, and he reversed and hit because there's this lump, and he reversed too vigorously. He hit the vehicle behind us and nobbled the radiator. Now, that's not a good thing in the desert, is it? A radiator is very, very essential generally. In a desert, in 50-degree heat, it's you can't get by without it. So basically disabled the vehicle. We actually managed to fix it. This is the advantage of reservist battalions, right? One of our guys was an engineer, a vehicle engineer. So it's like, all right, let's have a look. And he opened it. But he's actually able to fix it there and then without calling for any assistance. So the skills came in place. But back to the IED. There was a lump in the road. And so me and Mr. Sherwood, the lieutenant, this guy I told you about, we went forward. And there was a dog in the road. And it wasn't alive. It was a dead dog. How the hell does a dead dog get in the middle of the desert? That's a very, very good question. But it was a dead dog. And it seemed to be what looked like a command wire. Now, IEDs were detonated either by remote control over a distance where an observer's looking at you, or by a physical wire which is connecting to the detonator. So like, where's this detonating on? We couldn't see where it was going. And the lieutenant said, I'm going to go and have a look. And I was like, wait. You're the boss, right? If you get blown up, right, the best we got after this is a corporal. I'll go. So
you're cannon fodder.
Yeah, well, I was cannon fodder, wasn't I? I mean, I was a private, so that is what cannon fodder is. So I said, and I said this, and it's like, okay, not half expecting, pretty much expecting to get blown. We've not been very lucky that tour. And there's a dog, and we had intelligence of dead animals, donkeys and those sorts of things, being stuffed with explosives and rubbish heaps and those sorts of things, so they can be detonated. And so, oh my God, so this is probably what it is. It's probably a dog with a load of explosives inside its asshole, and it's going to be as soon as I get there. No, it wasn't. Very, very lucky. That long strand of line was actually its intestines. It had been ripped apart by mongooses or something like that. So I got there. I was like, have a look, and like, so I don't want to touch it. So I was like poking it with my rifle just to move it around a little bit, just to make sure. And I was like, no, we're okay. It's just a dog that had, or coyote, or the equivalent, Iraqi equivalent of a coyote that had been ripped. That command wire was just about 3 meters worth of intestines. So it could have been worse, luckily. And I don't say luckily because I love dogs, I love animals. I'm a vegetarian after all. But for us, luckily it was only a coyote or a dog.
We were at Baghdad International Airport. We'd already landed, taxied over, dropped off the cargo, and we were going to depart out of there empty. And as I'm taxiing out, we're getting ready to turn towards the main runway. There's this very large, if I could describe it, white box, perhaps the size of a small refrigerator, but you could see that it was a box. And it's partially blocking the taxiway. And, we're a big airplane, and we've got to make sure everything's clear so we're not ingesting anything in the engines. So I tell my loadmaster, hey, let's switch to idle, open up the door, and have the other loadmaster go move that box out of the way. And so as he steps off the airplane and he starts to walk towards it, it's almost like my mind just went into hyperdrive, and all of these images started coming into my mind of, oh my goodness, I'm literally sending my loadmaster to his death, because if he moves that box and it is an IED, he's going to die right in front of me. So I'm panicking, screaming, stop. Screaming as much as I can. And thankfully the other loadmaster got him to stop. And a big, large gust of wind pushes the box away far enough that it's out of our way. And I thought to myself, thank goodness, it was exactly what I thought it was. It was just a box from trash, burning trash at the end of the runway. They would always burn that stuff in the burn pits. And thankfully it blew away. And I just thought to myself, I would have asked one of my airmen to do something that caused his death, and it was completely 100% my fault for asking him to do that. And so we just become hypersensitive to these things, and all of a sudden,
made a big impression on you.
Yeah, I mean, that training, all of a sudden that training kicked in of, hello, you go through this training all the time. If something looks out of order, it could absolutely be them placing something to get you to go investigate, and one of your airmen is, I still have dreams about that. And it was just a box. That's all it was. It was just a box, but I still think about it.
It wasn't just a box when you're in the cockpit, though. It was just a box once the wind had blown. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's strange how, you talk about the red shoe, you talk about these particular images. I think about that box. I think about wounded soldiers that I've flown home in the back of the airplane, and I think about their faces. It's just like you said. I don't think about the whole experience. I think about very specific visual images. So you come home, you're back to cold, wet. You're handing in your weapons. You're putting on your civilian clothes. What does that feel like?
Oh man, it felt great. Okay, so we came back to England in October. England in October is like England. It's like New England in October. If you ever watch a Halloween film from America, it's cold, wet, lots of leaves. It looks like autumn or fall, as you would say. I was happy to be back. Really happy to be back. I was counting down the days that last month. We had a busy tour. We'd had multiple contacts, multiple casualties. Good to be home. We went to the mobilization center, the same place we'd gone before deploying. We returned there, returned our kit. Because some of the kit was loan kit, like night vision goggles, for example, that was ready for the next people to use. So I had to return all that. And then onto the minibus. We were going to Gloucester because we're a reserve battalion, so they had a minibus for each major city. So all the Gloucester guys went to Gloucester. The guy that picked us up, he had a crate of beer for us. It was only 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and I haven't had a beer in 6 months. So he bought a crate of beer, started drinking early, went home. First thing I did, my father, who dropped me off, picked me up because he lived so nearby. I went to his house, and like I said, he's like the chief detective. So nice large house, decent estate. Went up to the bathroom, drew a bath, and I sat in that bath for 5 hours, something like that, and nothing came to mind. I just gone. I had 6 months worth of combat. I need this. Zoned out completely disassociated with life. It was good to be back. And I said before, if someone wants to speak to me, they can just wait. I'm going to go and chill now. Best bath I ever had. It was good. There was a lot I wanted to think about. I forced myself not to, and I just started reconnecting with the more human aspects of being alive. The feeling of warm water, the clean towels, the quiet of the area. It was a strange way to come back to the UK. We didn't have any sort of decompression. It was, comp one day, hot bath the next. We didn't have any sort of come down. It was hugely, there was a gulf in feelings between the two. And my way of dealing with it was just saying, leave me alone for a little bit.
That was the next how to offer you.
Well, they did give us decompression in the loosest sense, is that we were mandatorily called into the TA center in uniform. In fact, I got picked up for speeding by the police on the way to the TA center, but they recognized my surname and they thought, oh, that's his, so they let me off. But I was doing about 120 miles an hour on the road. That's about, what's that in kilometers per hour? It's about 200 kilometers per hour, isn't it? I was, because I bought a sports car with the money I saved up. Because that's the interesting thing. In the reserves, you're not paid. I was a private, but I wasn't paid a private's wages. I was paid bank wages. They had to make it up.
Okay. Oh.
So all 6 months worth of bank wages with nothing to spend it on. The first thing I did after having that nice bath was go out and buy a sports car. Yeah. So I drove it, and I was about 200 kilometers an hour down the road. It's only 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But I was like, you'll see 17. I was trying to rotate, you know what I mean? I picked up, they recognized the surname, luckily, and I said, okay, I won't do it again. I explained I've been back from Iraq. I was in uniform, I was suntanned and things. I said, okay, we get it. Real nice guys, let me off. And so our mandatory decompression was to go and see the Padre, chaplain, and then we all were given $10 or £10 and said, go to the pub. And so we always went to the pub and just got drunk. And so that was our decompression. Now, I ain't a drinker, really. I don't like beer. whiskey. America's got the best whiskey. It's called Tin Cup Colorado whiskey. That's really, really nice. But I wasn't drinking much at the time. What I would have needed personally is maybe different to what other people would have needed. Maybe that's the problem with a reservist battalion. You're drawn from such a wide pool. A regular battalion, your privates are all between the age of sort of 18 and 23, and then your corporals are sort of like a little bit older, your sergeants. And so you're kind of segmented. We had privates in their 30s, they had me in their teens. How are you going to decompress and respond to the individual needs of those kinds of people? For me personally, decompression, getting out into the countryside, riding the horse, doing just taking it easy, seeing the green, something like that. Other guys, they're going to need something else. They want to go up clubbing, they want to go and see a rock concert, they want to spend time with their families. Of course, I didn't have a family. I was a young teenager, and so what I needed, what other people needed, we all needed the same thing. We all needed to decompress. The way we were going to do it was going to be different, and so I had my preference, and maybe that's why they ignored it. My feeling is they forgot about it.
Years later, you open another brown envelope, and you think it might be another call up.
Yeah, that was exactly the first thing, because the envelope is saying, whenever you get correspondence from the army, the envelope says it says on His Majesty's service. But back then, because Queen Elizabeth, God bless her, she was the monarch at the time, so every military envelope said on Her Majesty's service. Now, I'd only had one on Her Majesty's service envelope before, and I opened it, and it said 25173850 Private Matt Dog your quarter for. And so another one came. I thought, oh my God, we got the same thing again. I didn't want to open it, and I thought, I'll make a coffee beforehand. And so I opened it, but this time it said, Lieutenant 3013897, your commission has been confirmed. And I thought, that's what I'm talking about. Much, much nicer. So I've gone from private to lieutenant.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
So as a 19-year-old, did you feel you were serving a policy, a country, a regiment, a platoon, your friends, or your younger idea of yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I can answer that truthfully and wholeheartedly. When that letter came, my first thought was to my regiment, because I'm from Gloucester, and Gloucester boys, they joined the Glosters, okay? And that was my first thought. That soon changed within minutes after I sent a text message to James Broslin, Andy Foster, Foz. I ain't going to let these guys down. Mark Hill, Corporal Mark Hill, I ain't going to let them down. And I was 19, inexperienced. I was not a good soldier. I've never been a good soldier. Maybe that's a bit self-deprecating. I am not a very good soldier. Maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I get important things right. But I would not quantify myself as a good soldier, especially not compared to some of the guys I work with. But I didn't want to let them down. And so that as soon as I got the call-up notification, Gloucester boys come from Glosters. We've got a huge tradition going back to 1801. 1801. I'm not going to be the one to mess this up, but that changes quickly to looking after my friends.
So when listeners finish this conversation, what do you want them to remember about your reserve company?
Well, Salamanca Company, the reserve company, was the first British company in a generation since the Second World War, since the Korean War, to be deployed en masse. Before then, in between them, because it was the Cold War, the reserves had been designed as a battlefield casualty replacement sort of service. If a regular battalion loses people, you get new people. The British Army at the time was so overstretched, with Afghanistan in particular, that they weren't able to do that anymore. So they started sending out formed companies of reservist soldiers. And what I would like people to know, those who are interested in military, of course, is that a reservist is no different to the person who's working at Target, fixing your car, working at the petrol station. Maybe they're a police officer, maybe they're a bank clerk, maybe they're a financier, maybe they're an entrepreneur. Okay, they are the bread and butter of society. Okay, it's just they are doing something over and above that. For whatever reason, for me, genuinely interested in the military. Other people because they have some other ambitions, and that's important to remember, because that's a major component of not just the British a society, but as I understand it, and you being a former guardsman would recognize that it's a serious part of American society as well, the contribution of reservists to national defense.
Heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and when you're talking to a reservist or a guardsman, you have no idea what that citizen soldier is doing when they're outside of uniform. Like you mentioned, the accident where you had somebody that was a very skilled maintainer who could actually fix that equipment without you guys calling in some sort of maintenance team. So you really never know who you're dealing with. I had met this Chief Master Sergeant in the Washington National Guard, and we just started having a conversation. Come to find out, he's a senior vice president of Boeing, multi-millionaire, but loves to serve, loves to be around the young airmen, mentoring them, keeps him feeling young. And so you never know who you're going to run into. A squadron commander that worked for me when I was a group commander, he works for Google as a cloud software sales guy. He's a millionaire. And here, I'm the big guy in charge, but he's the millionaire making 10 times more money than I'll ever make. So once again, you never know. And so hopefully the active duty full-time soldier, hears these tidbits and realizes, what, that person I'm traveling with, that person I'm serving with, they've got some skill sets that we're not aware of.
Well, it's like I said earlier, it's not a union, it's a community.
Yeah. And when I was talking to you a couple of weeks ago, the Canadian Royal Air Force, they got C-17s, and so they did all our training. They did all their training with us. So I flew multiple missions and sim rides with the Canadian guys, and I just loved the camaraderie of being with those guys. And so you just, once again, you never know. So Matt, brother, this has been such a pleasure to talk with you. You are such a funny guy, and I look forward to keeping a friendship from here on out.
Me too. I really enjoyed being able to share this experience with you and your listeners as well. I hope they get something out of it.
Yes. So Basra and Back, and you are once again at Barnes and Noble. How else are folks finding you? I mean, I'm going to put a link on the website. Ooh, that's a big book. I'm going to put a link on the website that, they can go and purchase. But is there any other bookstores in the US that folks?
Yeah, all the major bookstores got it. So Barnes & Noble have got it. Of course, Amazon got it. It's Target are going to have it, or Target, as if you will. Yeah. They'll be picking up as well. That I investigated that link earlier this morning. It's not online yet. But Barnes & Noble have got it. Amazon have got it, and all major retailers will be stocking that book as well. And it's everything we've talked about.